Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Rev-Trac webinar on SAP Cybersecurity and Transport Security. We hope to provide you with some new and useful information about securing both your SAP systems and your SAP transport processes. Today's webinar is set for about 45 minutes. It's being recorded and everyone will get a link to the recording. Everybody's on mute except for myself and the co-host, Julie. The slides are available for you to download during the webinar. You can access them under the handout section. And or you can always email us afterward, just get in contact with us afterward for a copy of the slides if you want to see them. And then also please enter any questions that you might have in the chat window, and we'll do our best at the end of the webinar to get to those. So just a minute or two here after 11 o'clock Eastern time in the US, so let's get started. Okay. My name's Dan McGran. I'm today's co-host. I'm the sales director for Rev-Trac, based here in the United States on the East Coast, just outside of Philadelphia. And I've been working for about 15 years in this SAP change management space, helping customers put some processes around their SAP change management requirements. So good to be here today. And Julie, if you wanted to take a moment or two to introduce yourself, that would be great.
Good morning. I'm Julie Hallett. I have been recently published a book, the Practical Guide to Cybersecurity in SAP. I've been teaching and working in this subject since the early 2000s when people thought I was crazy. But it's good. It's good. We're at a place now where people are realizing that we need this. So I've been in the SAP security, SAP basis, and configuration trenches for many, many, many years. I have a master's in cybersecurity, my CISSP, and my certified in risk and information systems controls. And I've been working through the GRC and with Rev-Trac for over 10 years, I believe, at this point. So kind of understand the trenches and what's going on.
Great. Well, thank you. We're excited to have Julie join our webinar today, and are really looking forward to her discussion on, how to take a holistic approach to SAP cybersecurity. Again, we wanted to welcome everyone, both existing Rev-Trac customers that are on the call today, and those who might be joining us for the first time. We're going to cover a lot of ground in the next 45 minutes. Julie's going to start off explaining how to take that holistic approach to SAP cybersecurity. She's going to give an overview of some application security frameworks and how they can be applied to SAP security. Then she's going to look at some key SAP cybersecurity threats, and then wrap up with some risk management topics and recommendations. Then I'll take over to discuss SAP transport and STMS security. Briefly, I explain how SAP cybersecurity and transport security are connected or interrelated. Then explain Rev-Trac's role in all of this while giving a very brief introduction to Rev-Trac, and then wrapping up with our company's focus on how we develop and deliver a highly secure software solution for SAP change management. We won't have time for a demonstration today, but there are Rev-Trac recorded demonstrations available both on our website and on the YouTube channel. And of course, we're always welcome to have you reach out to us and we can get you more information or do a customized demonstration for you if you had more interest in that area. So at this point, I wanted to pass things over to Julie. Julie, I can control the slides just so we don't have to pass back and forth. And if you could just say next slide when you're ready, and I'll make that happen if that's okay for you.
That's perfect. Thank you. So one of the first things I try to do when I talk to people about cybersecurity is separate the real world from the buzzword, because all we hear about is cyber this and cyber that, and dark web this and that and this and that. So we have to understand that what it is holistically. What is it as a whole? Cybersecurity as a whole and a cybersecurity program includes so much more than what's on your network and your virus scanning stuff. It's your network, it's your information security, your application security, how you're managing your governance, risk, and compliance, and what your policies and your training look like for the people. If you don't have all of those things together, really wrapped up in a neat, tight bundle, you don't have the ability to really address cybersecurity as a whole. We've all been in a situation where we're working in SAP security and we're trying to get people to listen to us to say we can't have our RFCs with a star in it. We can't give SAP all of those things we've been preaching for years. And that's in that application security layer. But that also goes to your information security. It goes to your governance. It goes straight through down into your network security because it's all integrated. And, you know, as we're trying to get people on board to understand what we're trying to do from a secure SAP perspective, that's where that policy and education piece comes together. So that kind of gives you a feeling for why it needs to be looked at as a whole. If we only look at it from a network security perspective, and then we give SAP all in SAP, all we've done is opened the door for the next 0 day to come in and just zap all of our information right out of SAP, which is why it has to be looked at as a whole. Can you go to the next slide, please? So to look at it from a holistic perspective, we also want to make sure we can communicate from the CISO of our companies all the way down to the people actually at the help desk. And we want to understand how our overarching governance is done from a corporate security process. Most companies right now are using the NIST CIS framework. So that's a framework is basically, it's like a list of questions. How do you do this? Where's this? What's that? And what it does is it allows you to think about all of the things that need to be included, all of the things that need to be looked at, how to document them, and then how to plan getting those things done. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the NIST controls, that's the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, has been the real backbone for many years now. And a lot of companies have got either software that's built to be NIST compliant. The NIST controls influence and cross-reference back and forth to all of the ISO controls as well. So there are control maps and framework maps that map one framework to another and how their different controls interact with one another. But we're going to see real hardcore attention focused on frameworks moving forward. The Undersecretary of Defense for the United States government has pushed forward the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, the CMMC. And that's being done through the Department of Defense. But it doesn't just impact the Department of Defense. If you want to sell the United States government a paperclip, you have to go through the CMMC process. It's not just, you know, weapon systems. It's everything and anything that touches the United States government supply chain. And that is impacting all of us. I have sat on the CMMC build committees for the last year and a half, just sort of as a outside listener and participant, and have really used that time and those processes to really wrap my head around what that looks like. And when I had the opportunity to write the book, one of the things that I really looked at was how do we look at NIST and CMMC and make these things come together to help people, because it's not going to be too long before contracts are going to be canceled by the government if you don't have a CMMC program in place. Next slide, please. So one of these things is, how do we reconcile that into SAP? Well, the frameworks, you know, historically people have said frameworks are for your network security. No, frameworks look at the idea of cybersecurity from that holistic standpoint that we talked about in the first slide. There's a whole lot more into it. And it builds in as you go through the different layers of controls. So one of the important pieces of that is, how do we look at SAP through that lens? And we're going to talk about that a little bit too. But it really comes down to these controls ask questions. These questions apply to anything that has a network connection, that has a user. Any piece of technology, these controls ask questions of. They are interrogatories. And then when we're looking through these things with how expansive SAP is and how its connections go everywhere now, it really is important to really start asking those questions through the entire IT landscape, not just your network perimeter. Next slide, please. So to kind of give a little overview and understanding of this, so the NIST CIS controls and the CMMC, they all kind of break down into sort of a basic level of controls. There's the language is a little different in CMMC, but it's really still the same. You've got a basic level, then you've got your foundation, and then your organizational levels. So what that means is you're really basic cyber hygiene. So these controls that you see listed here really talk about what is your ground level information you need to know about your systems in order to have even the illusion of control of what you're doing. So we're looking at your inventories of hardware, software, your vulnerability management, administrative privileges, mobile device information, how are you doing your maintenance? How are you doing all of your monitoring, all of your logs? Where does all of that come together? That's in your basic cyber hygiene level. Next slide, please. I think you went backwards. There we go. Okay. So then you have the foundational level. So that's like the next step. I know what all of my things are. Now, what do I do about them? So, what are your email, your browser protections? You can read through these. You don't need me to read them to you. But as you can see, they build one on top of the other. Now, you don't have to do them in this order. And again, they are interrogatories. They are questions about your situation and about your entire enterprise from an IT perspective. So when you look at these, you can start thinking about which ones of these apply directly into SAP. You can see where account monitoring, how that applies. You could see where email and web browser would apply. You could see where data recovery and data protection, secure configuration. You could start thinking through these and start to see how they would apply, a little by little as you're working through this process. Next slide, please. And then at the organizational level, this is the really much harder ones to get in place. But you can see where this looks at that outer ring. It's looking at the security awareness and training, application layer security. That's really hardcore where SAP fits. But because SAP is so enormous and so, tentacles into everything, it also applies to everything else as well. And then, your pen tests, you can do SAP penetration testing as well. So that's something to think about there. But this is that top layer. I've got all my other stuff together. Now I'm moving my organization into being really strong and resilient and ready from a cyber perspective. Next slide, please. So how does this apply to SAP? So here's kind of how the questions could work. What physical hardware am I using? What are my servers made up of? What are my client software made up of? Am I using HANA? Where do all of those fall into place? Am I on Windows? Am I on Red Hat Enterprise Linux? Am I on something else? What are our OS and server patching policies? What's our database? What's the database patching policies? Where are our servers located? In a virtual and cloud world, this is pretty important, especially as you get into some of the requirements around data protection, around the GDPR rules in Europe, how you protect personal information, and what risk your corporate information is at based on where your servers are located. Then you're talking about internal and external connections. Am I hooked up to SuccessFactors in the cloud? Am I hooked up to Ariba in the cloud? What do my connections look like? Are my RFCs secured? All of those things. What version of SAP am I using? What am I doing about support pack and upgrades? And then what SAP modules are in use and where are they located? I mean, I've seen systems that every SAP module a company uses is on one server. Now that one server could be a cluster of servers, but it isn't all located in the same place. Then I've seen other situations where each module has its own landscape. And so there's different ways that these things are sort of done. And then, is the criticality of my data managed in any way? Do I protect my master data in any way? And what's my security role design? And my change management policy, which is kind of where Rev-Trac really shows its strength, is in that change management process. Next slide, please. So, some additional questions here. What are my roles? Best practices? Do I have manual objects thrown in everywhere? Do I have high risk transactions and authorization objects really tightly secured? Are we careful with those? Do I even know what a security note program needs to look like? What the application of those looks like? How do I measure? How do I weigh those? How do I get those tested? Personal devices. Can I look at anything from my personal device that is on a company SAP system anywhere, whether it's cloud-based or whatever? What's the, what companies or what countries am I actively working in with my SAP? Is my IP data loss controlled for high-risk companies? Intellectual property can make or break a company, and having that stolen could take them completely out. Where's my SAP HR module? And what is my PII and PHI? So PII, personally identifiable information. PHI, personal health information. Where is that located? How is it secured? That area can lead to pretty significant fines for companies that have leaks and breaches in those areas. And then things like, where's my bank data? For my company, for my customers, for my suppliers, and my employees? Is all of that in SAP? Are we protecting that bank data? Next slide, please. So you can see where the framework asks questions that we can then drill down into SAP. By being able to do that, we're able to communicate in a language that the entire security program understands, from the perimeter security people to the CISO. But one of the things that's really unique to SAP is master data. Master data is the heart and soul of SAP. It's your golden rule book for everything. And where is that stored? How is it secured? What would happen to your company if an outside person were to get in and be able to just copy all of that master data right out and use it for whatever they needed to use it for? Now, what are hackers looking for from your SAP system? Well, some SAP systems have a lot of computing power, large clusters of servers. They're wonderful tools for hackers. Not only are they trying to get into your system to do continuous data gathering, but they want to use your system as a launch pad to get into other systems, other companies. They can use your servers to do command and control attacks against their other targets, because your servers are strong, powerful, distributed. So if they've got their bots in servers at multiple companies all over, all of that computing power can then be pushed against a separate target. And then the ability to connect to all of the other systems in your landscape, all of the other personal devices, all of the other mobile devices, everything that those things are attached to, and be able to not only harvest data, but to go through the same exact thing that they're looking for, to be able to do this from all of those other places, to do the continuous data gathering, to be able to do command and control from all of those other locations. Next slide, please. So, risk management in SAP. This is a place where this is what can actually help us get funding. When you're really looking at, how do I more tightly secure this? How do I get the CISO on board? How do I get funding for new tools? How do I get funding to be able to kick off a project to redesign security? How do I get buy-in for those things? And a lot of that has to do with having the ability to assess and report and manage risk within SAP. This is kind of new when it comes to how SAP helps you do this. In the SAP notes, they now use the CVV scoring that all of the other major software reviewers use So they're able to say this note, we give this note a CVV score of 7, and we consider it to be a high priority because it is a risk from the perspective of cross-site scripting, or any of the other standard types of hacks that are used out in the wild. And because of that, they're now able to be, the SAP is now able to be aligned into a risk management program already in use for your network perimeter, for all of your external devices and your cloud providers. So as such, you're able to now bring this in and communicate it along with the rest of the items that are able to be reported out to upper management. And you're able to make real headway to say, here's the things that are the highest risk within SAP. Here's the dollar value of that data. And here's why we think that we should have an investment to do, a security rebuild, or we want to buy some penetration testing time, or any of those things, to be able to communicate in the same language that is being used on the rest of the security program. And this is something that, in my experience, in the last 15, 18 years, I've seen go from 0 to some companies. SAP is one of the items on their heat maps for everything that they always have in focus for security fund application. Next slide, please.
I think that was about it for your slides, unless I missed one. So
No, I think that was it too. When I get on a roll, I get on a roll.
Yeah.
So quick note about my book. I spent all of COVID, all of the lockdown, writing this guide for espresso tutorials. It is it's a small book. It is in human language, and it is really designed to help you step by step understand, communicate, and implement change to move your SAP instance and your landscape into a cyber secure methodology. How do you get it into the frameworks? What authorization objects? What different SAP modules, SAP hardware, different software pieces, all of those things are in here to say, here's how you secure each one of these things. Here are the things you need to worry about. There's a whole chapter on how do you create a risk management program for SAP, and how do you actually do the measurements for getting that risk management rolled in, folded into a NIST program, and as such also a CMMC program. So I'm pretty proud of it, but my goal in writing it was, I've been teaching on this at all of the SAP conferences. I've taught at TechEd, I've taught at GRC conferences, I taught at the SAP Cybersecurity conferences that they had for a little while. They've rolled that back into GRC recently. But I've been teaching at that on those since 2008 about this. And so I rolled all of those years of research into this to be able to help other people do these things. So I'm hoping it's helpful. I'm hoping it makes a difference.
Absolutely. Wow, Julie. No, really, that was fantastic. Thanks for sharing all that information with everyone today. I've read the book, and I can say it's full of great information and insights, and just really good actionable recommendations for customers, right? In an easy to read format and an easy to apply format. And remember, we're giving away 50 electronic copies of the book to attendees today. We have a lot of attendees, so about 2 out of every 3 will get one. But even if you weren't one of the recipients of the free copy, I'd still highly recommend finding the book on Amazon, getting a copy. Something would be very helpful for you and your organization, I bet. So I wanted to tell a quick story about how this webinar came together before I get into my part. So Julie and I have been connected on LinkedIn for quite some time, but for those who are somewhat active on LinkedIn, I think you know that you're typically not communicating directly with your contacts all that frequently, right? I remembered that Julie had some great security certifications, such as that CISSP and others. And from what I understand, those certifications are hard to get and maintain. So I was always impressed with that. And actually, I think I might have mixed her up with another Julie that I worked with a while ago, who incidentally had the CISSP certification as well. I forget how it came about. But then about 2 months ago, I saw Julie's book on her LinkedIn feed and just reached out to congratulate her. It looked like a great book, and I feel it's highly relevant. Of course, today with all the IT security events going on, you can't miss them these days. So I started thinking about this webinar, and I just reached out to Julie, asked if she wanted to participate, and she was all for it. And then I learned something new that I didn't know before. It turned out that Julie was very familiar with and a bit of a fan, I'd like to say, of Rev-Trac from her time when she worked for our customer Armstrong years ago. So that was a great connection, something I hadn't known before. So fast forward and sort of here we are. And I wanted to thank Julie again for headlining today's webinar and that great information that you provided. And in the Q&A section, we'll probably come back with Julie, because if some questions come up, I'm sure I'm going to need her help with those things. So I'm going to cover those topics we just saw there in the next 15 or so minutes. And the first one is just, SAP transport and STMS security are definitely important topics, but for the most part, I think we know very little has changed in these areas over the past 10, 20, or even more years. We have a link to a blog here, and you'd be able to get that in the PowerPoint slides. And that blog gives a good quick overview of a few things to keep an eye on in those areas. You'll notice that the blog, if you can read the small print, is about 8 years old and has lots of views. And it's still very relevant, even though it's 8 years old, because as I just mentioned, not much has changed really with SAP transports and STMS over the years. When we looked at the recommendations in this blog, we quickly saw that anyone using Rev-Trac, they could easily mitigate these security concerns that were identified here by using Rev-Trac. Some of these topics get a little bit technical, and on the next page, one of our senior Rev-Trac consultants provided detailed answers on how Rev-Trac addresses these concerns. But for now, I just wanted to point out a few things, right? So Rev-Trac has a capability called sensitive objects, which can be configured to address the extra transport concerns and those STMS related transports and function modules that are identified in that first and fourth bullet point here. Also, since Rev-Trac doesn't rely on SAP transport routes, which is a good thing, really beyond just an initial route on your SAP development systems, you can limit access to the TMS ADM functionality, which makes by itself things more secure, limiting access to that. And then also, just in general, limiting access rights to other STMS functionality and eliminating user-based access to remote TP commands. It's also a direct benefit of using Rev-Trac. Again, here are some of the more details that I won't go into because it's a little bit over my head, but you could download this as part from the handouts here, or email us afterward for a copy, so you might be able to refer to this. But again, that blog was still relevant today, addressing some of those transport and STMS security concerns and how Rev-Trac handles it. And when I was reading Julie's book, I noticed several areas which are clearly related to securing SAP change, transport, and release management, which is what we're all about at Rev-Trac. And in fact, I think I need to talk with our marketing director to see if we can use Julie's introduction to her one section of 8.2.3 that's on the screen here and use that in a future marketing campaign, because it aligns so perfectly with what Rev-Trac has been doing for almost 20 years, and we really couldn't have said it better ourselves. It's on the screen. I normally don't read things, but it sounds so good. I just like to quickly read it. Clear change management, testing, and transport procedures are important to the overall maintenance of a secure and stable SAP landscape. Like I said, that's perfect. That's exactly what we've been talking about to SAP customers for a long time. And when we speak with our customers, they give us a lot of great feedback regarding how Rev-Trac helps them, right? They tell us that Rev-Trac enables them to create a structured, a formalized, and a highly automated change control process. It also enforces the documentation of changes and the testing procedures and testing documentation and testing evidence and the right sign-offs or approvals to enforce a standardized change process that is still easy to use and easy to manage, because it needs to be highly adoptable by the end users, or else they're always looking for workarounds, right? And that process allows for the auditability and accountability, which also ensures that an organization's compliance and governance requirements are met. So that's really how this part of Julie's book relates back to SAP transport and even to Rev-Trac. Overall, again, the entire book is fantastic, but there were a few sections which really captured my attention. given my background in SAP change management. You can see some of them here. These are just a few of about a dozen SAP security recommendations from Chapter 8 of the book. These are verbatim, Julie, so I hope I'm not violating any anything here by sharing them. Of course, I chose the ones which have to do with transport or change management, and those recommendations are completely aligned with our recommendations for customers as well that we've been giving over the years. For example, looking at the top one, having a reason or approval for starting development is of course one of the best ways to keep things in order. It's easier said than done in reality, but Rev-Trac can easily enforce that if needed. For example, with a lot of customers, we enforce a process that says you can't start a Rev-Trac and therefore any transport activity until you have a valid ITSM ticket in ServiceNow, or maybe a user story approved in Jira, or whatever your process might be. Moving on, you need to maintain and follow the transport rules. Sounds like common sense, but it's amazing to me how many SAP customers routinely bypass the transport process and just make changes in systems directly. I think that you could call that the direct opposite of best practices, right? Maybe worst practices doing that. And we all know sometimes direct changes are required, but in those cases, you could even configure Rev-Trac to tightly control that system opening process, let's call it, and make sure it's fully documented, fully auditable, and done in a safe and controlled manner. And finally, a big benefit of having that structured SAP change management process, which Rev-Trac provides, is to make sure your SAP audits go smoothly, right? And Julie certainly addresses a lot of that in the book as well, with making sure that audits are a key component of your processes and your security overall approach. So a little commercial for those that aren't familiar with our company. Our company name is Revelation Software Concepts. We also go by RSC, and our main software solution is called Rev-Trac. We've been helping all sizes of organizations to automate and simplify their SAP change management processes for more than 20 years now. We consistently deliver outstanding results to SAP customers, really enabling them to meet their agility and transformation goals. Many times, those goals are related to increasing change velocity and volume, right? Delivering changes to the business users faster in a more agile way, while also improving the change quality and system stability, while reducing your costs of managing that change. As a company, we're 100% focused on SAP's on SAP change management challenges that our customers have. And we really have a great reputation for delivering support through our organization there, which is incidentally based on the other side of the world for me in Melbourne, Australia, but I know we have people attending from all over the world. Regarding our software, I just wanted to spend a few minutes on a brief introduction, right? So Rev-Trac is written in ABAP and has been for since the beginning, and it's just that SAP change, release, and transport management solution that helps you control that end-to-end process of your SAP changes, from that initial need through your testing and your documentation and deployment to your production systems, including retrofits if you have a more complex environment with N+1 systems, as they're commonly called. And we make sure that the correct people and the correct teams are automatically notified when their approval is needed, and certain activities are enforced, right? So that you can have a secure development and transport process. It also has that comprehensive audit trail, which I mentioned, to make sure that the process that you have documented is being followed, so you can match those up during your audit time. And what's unique about Rev-Trac compared to other process automation tools, such as ITSM tools, is we have a deep real-time management of the SAP transport details, right? What that means is everybody involved in the process knows the real-time status of their SAP changes, as well as their colleagues' SAP changes, including the transports down to the object and configuration level, so they can have all that information in one real-time centralized place. So that means that we can do special things, because we can look inside these changes, inside the transports, and that's where our sensitive objects example and functionality that I mentioned before comes into play, right? We look into the transports and we can handle them differently. Maybe they have those extras in them and we want to prevent them or or have an extra set of eyes or some extra approvals go in for that. Or you might have some types of changes that require additional testing or special handling. So we can do that, and that's what's unique about Rev-Trac. Now, we also integrate with the ITSM solutions and ServiceNow and Jira requirements management definition solutions, I should say. SAP code checking integration is interesting, right? Because to me, that's very important from a security aspect, right? You can have SAP ABAP Test Cockpit, ATC, or you could have commercial tools such as from Virtual Forge, their code profiler, now owned by a company called Onapsis, where you can send your code automatically to do security checks and other types of checks. That's so fundamental and basic, but in our experience, 10 or 20% of SAP customers actually do that. It's built right into Rev-Trac now that code checking can be part of your process and automated part of your process so it isn't skipped. And we do a lot of these integrations via our secure REST APIs. We did a webinar on the security aspects of our REST APIs a few months ago, if you want to check that out on our website. A couple other pieces of Rev-Trac is it's, of course, certified in SAP with old versions, new versions, and we're officially an SAP ABAP add-on since we're building ABAP, and we support those traditional ABAP changes as well as non-ABAP changes, BobJ changes, and data services changes, and cloud-based changes, and even to some extent non-SAP changes. So that's a little bit about our process automation capabilities within Rev-Trac. And again, we don't have time for a demo today. We're probably going to wrap this up in the next 5 or 10 minutes for questions, but I wanted to take a minute to explain at a high level how Rev-Trac automates your SAP change management processes, right? That's what we mean by process automation. In our experience, every SAP customer manages their changes in a unique way, right? I've been working with SAP customers, I think I said in the beginning, for about 15 years and regarding SAP change management, and no two have the same processes. I sometimes joke that when I find two customers that are doing it the same way, I've been in it too long and I need to find something new, I need to move on. But there are some commonalities between customers. Everybody has emergency changes, but they might not call them emergency changes, or they might have 3 levels of emergency changes. They may call them critical changes or P1 changes. It doesn't matter, but you have to be able to process emergency changes in a secure way in SAP. Security changes, right? Many of our customers set up a completely different workflow or process. Workflow and process automation are synonymous, so I might use those terms interchangeably. You might have a different workflow for your security changes because they need a special set of approvals to go through. You might also have some easier changes, low impact or standard changes, pre-approved changes, something like that go through a very streamlined workflow. Then everybody has their normal or weekly or planned, whatever you might call them, changes that you're moving in on a consistent basis that everyone's sort of aligned to. But even those have some off-cycle ones that say, oh, it's part of the weekly, but it needs to be moved outside the normal window. So Rev-Trac can identify those things. People might operate in releases or small, medium, large enhancements, small, medium, large projects. That's what Rev-Trac does. And I just wanted to, again, in lieu of a demo, this is sort of the essence of Rev-Trac, right? We create these workflows or process automations that you decide what they look like, right? So maybe you might have some initial test of some SCC1 copying that you're doing in dev that you want to make sure everyone does. So you put that in as a process step in Rev-Trac or a status, and then you do some peer review steps before it gets migrated and testing and so on and so forth. But like, one size doesn't fit all. So you can create these workflows very quickly and easily in Rev-Trac. What we're looking at here is our web interface, a small screenshot of it that shows these workflows. I should explain that. Basically, every Rev-Trac workflow has a new step and a complete step. Everything in between is up to you. This is a very simple one, maybe one for your low risk changes. Not a whole lot going on. Get them processed quickly because they are low risk and pre-approved. Maybe you have to do some upfront business approval before a change is ever made. That's a good idea to help keep things clean. And then you do some unit testing before you migrate it. Again, these are just some examples. There's no limit to how many workflows you can create in Rev-Trac. and you could have 5 steps or 50 steps. We normally recommend 50 steps because we don't think the users would appreciate that, but there's no real limit. You just have to find the right balance for your types of changes and the requirements that you have as an organization. And that's where Rev-Trac really shines, is in its flexibility to enforce those different process automation or change workflows. Another aspect that helps Rev-Trac and helps customers is our automated error detection. Right, so people have been dealing with sequencing issues in Rev-Trac for 20 or 30 years, and we've had this OOPS functionality called Overtake and Overwrite Protection System to help with that. Several years ago, we've introduced another error detection tool called PODS, Peripheral Object Dependency System, and that will help you understand if you're going to move a change into a target system, if there are any dependent transports that are not already in that target system or not included with that change. So we alert you before you go. We like to call it the look before you leap check. These are fully automated, all included with Rev-Trac. We're always checking for parallel development when people are working on the same objects or the same configuration changes down to the key level. We do that with our extended locking capabilities. And then other automated error checks that can be easily configured and built into Rev-Trac. You just see some listed here, which it's certainly not an exhaustive list, but the good thing is Rev-Trac is always checking 7x24 to make sure that you're doing things in the right order with the right dependencies, you're not missing any transports, those types of things, right? And then the last thing that Rev-Trac does, last high level thing that Rev-Trac does is deploying the changes, right? They move, the basis team isn't moving the changes anymore, Rev-Trac is doing them using the standard SAP deployment methods like TP, but we can do them however you choose to. Event-driven, many times going into a quality system. As soon as a Rev-Trac approval is achieved by the right person on the team, it moves into the quality system. No more putting in a ticket or asking basis to move it for you or your outsourced partner to move it for you. Moving into production, they're typically not event-driven or on demand. They're more scheduled, once a week, twice a week, whatever schedule you might have, or when the project comes up, you put you schedule that for the big go lives. And you can precisely control them within Rev-Trac, which is standard SAP variants. That gets into some of the details. We're always tracking for errors. We have full import history and reporting, also good for audit and security purposes, right? I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on those things. Here was one more, even for seasoned Rev-Trac customers that might be on the call today. Wanted to point this out because, again, it related back to a section of Julie's book. Post-project cleanup is important, but who has the time? She identified it in one of her sections, as we see highlighted here. Everyone's running at full speed during the project, and they need to catch their breath after the project goes live, right? So doing the post-cleanup is often forgotten or skipped, but Rev-Trac can help here too. Included with our Rev-Trac software, the change control piece is another product, fully no additional charge, called Insights. For older Rev-Trac customers, it used to be called SALT, but it was renamed Insights a few years ago, and it has about 9 apps that help you manage some of that development activity that's going on. 2, to point out that it can help with Julie's point here to do some post-project cleanup work, is one app called Work in Progress, which shows you by developer, by their SAP user ID, what they were working on, and did they leave anything out there unfinished, something that was in development or in quality, never made it to production. You get that quick list and you can work through that list. So you have that information at your fingertips. Another app is called Cold Case. This isn't looking at the user perspective, it's just a timing perspective. Any changes that are between 6 and 12 months old, show me per development system. And again, you can have a list, clean up some stuff that hasn't been finished, that's just hanging out there, hopefully not waiting to cause an issue, but that's what can happen if you don't clean these things up. So Rev-Trac helps in those areas as well. We wanted to point that out, and again, how that related back to the book. So my last point here was not only can Rev-Trac help with that your secure transport processes and shoring up your STMS functionality, because Rev-Trac sort of replaces a lot of that might be distributed to lots of people, and just in that way making it more secure. But we develop software, the Rev-Trac software, in a very secure manner, right? And we actually have standard operating procedures and have had for many, many years to develop it in that way. So we're always delivering highly secure software. We have full release notes with each version, so customers know what has been changed. We do periodic network and application penetration tests by third-party organizations. An example there is we were just certified again for SAP S/4HANA Cloud Extended Edition, and our software was run through SAP's CVA, their Code Vulnerability Analyzer, right? And we had to go through that process to show that our code was very secure for SAP customers, since we're a certified application for SAP. And of course, as all software companies do, we have a comprehensive testing process. So that's a little bit about how security is very important to us as we're developing the software. And then once we roll it out to our customers have very strict and stringent security requirements these days, more so than ever, right? So we support single sign-on and SAML 2 for secure single sign-on capabilities. We secure our REST APIs in the SAP change management space. We're unique in this aspect because our integrations support OAuth 2 with the REST APIs, which again is the recommended most secure way if you're going to integrate with a ServiceNow or a Jira or some of these other tools. So again, we take security very seriously, both on the development side and then operationally for our customers. So final thoughts before we move on to the Q&A section. So, right, I think we all agree, and we're happy everyone's joined today, that SAP cybersecurity is critical, needs to be addressed. A great way to start addressing that is certainly Julie's book. You can certainly reach out to Julie after this, herself, her company. She has a lot of expertise in that area, so feel free, please, to do that. We know that SAP Transport and STMS security are important, but they're a subset of that holistic SAP cybersecurity approach that Julie was talking about. And Rev-Trac, I gave a brief introduction. Believe me, there's a lot more to Rev-Trac than I gave on those couple slides, but we address a lot of those security requirements when it comes to change control and SAP transport management processes. And just talked about how we develop and deploy it with the security as a priority. And for 50 of you, keep an eye out for an email regarding an electronic copy of Julie's book and how we're going to get that to you in the next couple of days. That might not come until later this week or early next week, but you'll certainly, many of you will be hearing from me regarding how to get that book for attending today's webinar. So again, we appreciate that. I'm going to do my best here to move over to the questions and see if I can pop them out. Okay, I
do have something to add.
Yeah, please do, while I'm fumbling with this. Please do.
All good. One of the things that the different frameworks really heavily address is change management processes. Those frameworks, and CMMC is very heavy into change management processes. It is looking for documentation on exactly what your policies are for change management, how it's implemented, how it's documented, how it's tested, and how you can make sure that changes aren't going in, I want to say, willy-nilly. So that's where Rev-Trac really keys into that framework process, those things that are going to be required through people who have to go through the CMMC process, or if your company is really heavily relying on the NIST framework to really keep their systems controlled and secure. So this is a situation where Rev-Trac as a change management tool ticks every box in those frameworks as to how you can make sure that your system is, up to snuff when it comes to change management. It's always been a huge problem in SAP, and over the years, I've seen it done every way you could possibly do it wrong. So, it's one of those things. I am not a paid spokesperson for Rev-Trac, but I have always been a Rev-Trac appreciator and aficionado, because it does the job that I don't have to do anymore.
Yeah, very much appreciate that non-endorsement endorsement. Thank you, Julie. We do have a couple of questions, and I think they're more addressed to you. So I'm going to read them here and see if you have any. If I'm not clear on it, we'll try and get to the bottom of it. So, are you with SAP Security Baseline using configuration validation? If so, how do you feel the target systems are designed out of the box? What enhancements would you make to monitor security as it relates to changes? I'm not sure if you're capturing that, but that was the, sort of all one question, but a couple filled in there.
Okay. I'm not entirely sure I understand the question, truthfully, but when it comes to secure configuration, it starts with policy. What are your people allowed to ask? How are they supposed to document that ask? And how is it supposed to be tested? If your security people have shoulder taps and help desk tickets and everything under the sun coming at them all at once, you don't have a way to really track and document all of those changes. You also need to make sure that people can't make changes. You just turn off PFCG entirely in non-production, non-development system. So if you have to make an emergency change in PFCG, you have to use Firefighter or something of that nature. You have to have an approval process in a QA system, if you're going to be really hardcore about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then,
and what I'll do,
change management documentation through something like Rev-Trac or through the whatever your help desk ticketing or project management systems is critical as well.
Good. And what I'll do is, if it's okay with you, Julie, the askers of these questions are identified here. I could just shoot them an extra email afterward, and can I share with them your email address? There's only three questions here.
Absolutely.
Is that okay in case?
Absolutely.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
So you can have more in-depth discussions. So next one was, how do these frameworks interact with agile methodologies? Okay.
Agile methodologies all fall under the actual software development portions of your frameworks. So the methodologies like Agile and Waterfall and all of those sorts of things that you're using for a development process are all developed with the NIST framework in mind. So if you're using Agile for SAP and you're using that as your development process and your change management process, then you're already embedded into a NIST framework or a CMMC framework, because you already have that documentation and that process in place.
Okay, very good. Do you suggest implementing UCON, in non-production systems? I'm sorry, can't help them. I don't know that acronym. I don't know if you do either.
I'm not that familiar with UCON anymore. It's been a while, but I'm a believer in, if you use it in your production system, you should use it in your non-production system as well. Maybe not as tightly controlled, because it does give you that, making sure it all works together.
Okay, so keep it consistent in some ways. Yeah. Let me see. I think there was one or two more that had just come in. Actually, this one's more of I don't see a question. I've been working with SAP Solution Manager's Charm for a while and very eager to understand Rev-Trac's working and its cybersecurity aspect in SAP. And your suggestions for me to help to get more knowledge and start with SAP Cybersecurity will help a lot. So I get more of a comment than a question, sorry. But thank you for that comment. Glad that's what we're hoping to do here today, is be helpful and share some good information. And then a bit of a puzzling question, because I didn't quite understand it. It says, any demo for the same? So demonstrations for, as far as Rev-Trac goes, absolutely. There are some available on our website and on YouTube under Rev-Trac channel. Just search for Rev-Trac with a C, and you'll find a bunch of 5, 10, 15-minute videos on different aspects of Rev-Trac. I could say demos for SAP cybersecurity, probably. I'm not sure if there are comprehensive ones on that. So hopefully that question was related to Rev-Trac demonstrations.
Well, there are a
Unless there's
lot of
something other.
examples and screenshots in the book on different areas that, you know, of cybersecurity for SAP. So when it comes down to actual, like in SAP itself, what you're doing. So that's actually available in the book. I can't do any kind of demos or anything.
Right, perfect. Okay, I don't see any more, so we're wrapping up here just about 10 minutes longer than we expected, and most of that was quick Q&A. So we appreciate everyone's time today, the questions and interaction there. Julie, I will send a couple of these questions directly to you from the participants, because we have their email addresses. If you perhaps have a conversation with them offline, there's only a few of them. If you and them choose to, that would be great. Want to thank you again very much, Julie, for headlining today's webinar and presenting that topic and giving us the opportunity to share some information about Rev-Trac and how it applies to change management and SAP transport and STMS security today. So very good. Thanks, everyone. I think I'll be ending the webinar, and just some thank yous at the end. No more questions. That's it. Have a good day, everybody, and look for those emails from us for those that are getting the copy of the book. We should be getting that getting back to you in the next couple days. So bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.